And maybe we got a solid connection this time. I've noticed that some of these channels, my live stream channel, I have a lot of trouble with it. Well, a lot of traffic this morning. Normally there's not that much traffic. It is a Friday. People are getting an early start on the long weekend. We've got the long weekend, the Labor Day weekend, so a lot of people are getting a jump on it, going down to the beach, getting their spots, going to the paid beaches like Fort DeSoto and stuff, places where you can camp out on the beach and going to get their spot. And or maybe they're leaving town and going to Pensacola, or maybe they're going to head up to Orlando, up that way, and go to Disney World or something. But we got the long weekend, so normally this is a pretty quiet street, and there's a lot of traffic this morning. Let's take a look at the waterfront, see what's going on. And I heard thunder, and yesterday the weather report said that we were going to get 50% rain. So in the news, they're still talking about that little girl that shot her instructor with an Uzi. And, I don't know why you'd want to train a 9 or 8-year-old little girl how to use an Uzi unless you're planning on her joining some kind of street gang or protecting herself from a street gang. You've got to know how to use an Uzi in case you get attacked by a gang. She probably lives in the suburbs somewhere, and maybe she's going to get attacked by the Oxford or Princeton gang or something. I don't know. But to teach a kid like that how to use an Uzi, it just doesn't make much sense. When my kids were real little, I had a 22 rifle with a scope on it, and it was a semi-automatic, which means, as long as you have to pull the trigger every time you want to shoot, and it would hold, I don't know, 20 something bullets in it. Depends if you use longs or shorts. And I used to take my kids target practicing. My dad, when I was a kid, he would load us all up into. My dad had a '59 Cadillac, and it held a lot of kids, and my dad had a lot of kids. There was 10 of us, but for the younger ones, and then he had grandkids, and he would load us all up into the Cadillacs and take his brothers. The adults would sit in the front. And for anybody that's familiar with the '59 Cadillac, well, it's a big car. It's a boat, and we'd all go target practicing. My dad was a hunter. He'd go every year, take some time off from work, and he would go, deer hunting, elk hunting, whatever, pheasant hunting. So my dad had all those rifles. He had shotguns, and he had 22 handguns, and he had 22 rifles, and then he had the big old hunting rifles, and he would take us and teach us how to use these guns. So I understand why somebody would take a 9-year-old. At that time, my son was probably 5 and my daughter was 10, and I would take him to show him how to shoot a rifle. And it was fun. We'd set bottles up across the lake, and then we'd come back and we would shoot at the bottles and the cans. That was before there was no such thing as littering, but we were down in a gravel pit, and it didn't matter if you broke bottles or left cans. It was all going to be dug up anyway and put into crushers, and they were going to make streets out of it, or whatever they used it, concrete, whatever. But I used to teach my kids how to shoot a rifle. But maybe it's just the sign of the times. Maybe, today you don't teach a kid how to shoot a 22 pistol. My dad had it looked like a German Luger, and it was a 22. Nice little handgun that he had. And he used that when he'd go rabbit hunting. And, like I said, he had all kinds of guns, and that's what he taught us how to use, how to shoot, how to be safe. Never point the rifle at anybody, because you never know if it's loaded, even if you're absolutely sure. that it's not loaded. You never point a rifle at somebody. You never point a gun at anybody, even if you're absolutely sure that the gun is empty. You never point it at anybody. Them were the kind of things that my dad taught us. If you're walking with a rifle, point it up. Never walk with a rifle pointed down or any other way other than up. Because if you're walking with a rifle, the chances are pretty good that you're hunting, for example, and you've got to have live rounds in the rifle, so you point it up. You always carried your rifle pointing it up. So them were the simple things that you learn, that we learned when we were kids about handguns. But why you teach somebody to use an Uzi, that hasn't all sunk in yet. I can't even think of a logical reason why you teach a kid to use an Uzi in the United States of America. Well, with all the trouble in Gaza, the Middle East, the Ukraine, where these people are at war, yeah, you might want your 9-year-old daughter to know how to use an Uzi. You're at war. So, you want to teach them how to use a handgun. That might be something that you'd want to think about. But in the United States of America, especially in the city, where you can pick up the phone and an army will show up at your front door, and I mean an army will show up, depending on what you're calling for. But when you dial 911, you put them on alert and they show up. At least they do here in St. Petersburg. They did in Denver, Colorado. I don't know what it's like in your part of the world, but that's what it's like in my part of the world. But I just don't get why you'd be teaching a 9-year-old to use an Uzi. Now, the other question that I had, because they had the owner of the range on TV, on MSN TV. I think Chris Hayes was interviewing him. And he was asking him stuff like, do you plan to close the range down after this? And the guy says, no, I went and I prayed about it. 500 people, we prayed. We're praying for the little girl. We're praying for our dead colleague who was like a brother to me. We're praying about this. And, they should have prayed about it before the girl shot the guy. This God that they pray to is always a little late. Always a little late. When I was sick in the hospital, the people from different kinds of churches would come into my room and say, well, God wants you here for a reason. And I'm trying to be a nice guy on top of being sick, not in the mood to argue with anybody, I had to pick my words because I wasn't able to say many of them. And I would just think, well, could a God showed up before I got sick? Could God show up before this little girl blew that guy's head off? And I'm sure with a Uzi, she took a good part of his head off. Probably wasn't a pretty thing. So now this little girl is scarred for life, unless she's a sociopath. You don't have to be a certain age to be a sociopath. Sociopath, that's a disease. You don't learn how to be a sociopath. So unless she's a sociopath, she's going to see that guy's head splattered all over the range for the rest of her life. At least that's what I think. I think that's what she would see. But I kind of wondered, because then he said that some of the changes that they would make would be a height restriction. That the kids that come there would, they would check their height, like if they were, and he kind of said it, like just like an amusement park. If you go to Disneyland, you can't get on this ride unless you're this tall. And then he went on to say how tall they grew, the 9-year-olds in his area. And I got to thinking about it, and I said, well, I wonder what would happen if a Muslim family came in with their daughter, and they were dressed in the clothes that they wear, cover their head and all that stuff, and the father was dressed, in those long white nightgown things that they kind of wear, but they were dressed like Muslims, how you would imagine a Muslim to look in another country. Because here in the United States, after a while, we all look the same. I don't care what you do. After a while, we look the same, we talk the same, we walk the same, we think the same. If you're born and raised in the United States, it doesn't matter what you are. But if you're from another country and you move here, and you're still holding on to a lot of the culture from the country that you come from, I'm just wondering how eager this gun owner would be to train a Muslim daughter or a black. A black family goes in there. He'd probably say, oh yeah, we train black families all the time. These people don't need to be trained, for one thing. They already know how to use an Uzi. And, that's stereotyping right there, because not all black families know anything about gangs or Uzis, and the same with Muslims. But I think that with the way the world is today, it's pretty hard to escape living in the Middle East and not knowing something about a gun. Of course, not all people want to use a gun to defend themselves. Some people don't want to defend themselves. They're pacifists. They would rather die than kill somebody. They're living hardcore religion. More Christians should do that, because we have that big old rule, thou shalt not kill. And somebody was wondering in the chats the other day, was this a Christian family? Well, I think if they weren't a Christian family, and then I'm just voicing my opinion here, that guy wouldn't have got his 500 friends and prayed for them. I can't imagine this guy praying for a Muslim family or a Jewish family. I couldn't imagine that. And then a lot of it was the way he talked and, the way he looked. I just couldn't imagine him praying for anybody who wasn't a Christian. So I would think that family was a Christian family. And the way that he went to praying right away, I would think that most of his customers were Christians. Thou shalt not kill, but in case you have to, use an Uzi. And make sure your children know how to use Uzis. So we had our election. Charlie Crist is the Democrat nominee. And I voted for Charlie Crist. And like I said, one of the reasons I voted for Charlie is because I think he's going to help our state with the social programs that we need. Florida is, for the residents, we're an older state. This is where people come to live out their good years. They've already done all they're going to do in the world. They've already worked their 30 years in a factory, or as a secretary, or as some kind of executive that got a salary or whatever. They've already put in their time, and they're here to relax. Enjoy the sun, because the older you get, cold weather isn't something that agrees with you when you're older. I didn't stay in Colorado long enough to get that old where being old bothered me. My mom lived to be 96, and she was, in her older years, was cold all the time, but she couldn't imagine herself living any place other than where we lived, in Denver. She had no... One time we talked about moving her, and she said nope. She says, I lived in the country when I was growing up, and I didn't have nothing when I was growing up, and I live in Denver, and I have everything I want. No, I'm not going nowhere. And she was right. If you lived in Denver, you had everything you wanted. And if you couldn't find it in Denver, just like here in St. Petersburg, you probably don't need it. You can find everything that you need when you live in the city, and everything you want. If you want an experience of another country, you can go to some of these places that are, they have that country theme. You want to go to Russia, you can go find kind of like a Russian restaurant or something like that. Some of the bigger cities like San Francisco, you can actually go to whole neighborhoods that are filled with a particular group. In other words, Chinatown, Germantown, Mexican town. You can go to Italian town and Japanese town, and you can go to all these little communities that's all that lives there. How they manage to do that, I don't know. I don't know how you can say you can't live here unless you're Japanese, or people just said, hey, that's their community. I don't want to live in their community. Or maybe there was people like that were different, that lived in the community, and I didn't see it. Because when I went to San Francisco, one of the first things that I did do was I went people shopping. because I found it so interesting that you could go into a community where there was thousands of just one kind of people. When I went into Chinatown, I just thought it was so cool that you could go in there and it was like being in China, except for you never left the United States. Same thing, I went to Germantown, I went to Mexican Town, I went to Japantown, I went to Oakland, which you might as well say that's an African American or black town. That's what was there, and all of the same kind of people. And at first it was kind of weird, It took some getting used to. I'll admit it. I have prejudices that I control, and I believe that you can't help what you think, but you can do things about what you think. You don't have to. In other words, if you're afraid of black people, you don't have to show that you're afraid of black people or defend yourself or overreact. All you have to do is go into the communities and just hang around. And before you know it, the fear's gone. And the next thing you know, you're just amongst people. And that's what I did. I just decided I wasn't going to be afraid. And I went into all of these communities. And it was the same. I've gone into redneck communities where everybody turns their head, and that's usually what happens if you walk into a black bar and there's nothing but black people in there, and you walk in and I'm Hispanic. That's the name we use this day. I don't know what we'll use next year, but this year we're Hispanics. And I've walked into bars where I was the only Hispanic, and they turn their heads. People are like that. Anytime they see something different, and anytime you see something different, you have this kind of reaction. And you can't help what you think, but you can help what you do. And you can decide not to be a certain way or display your fears or ignorances. You can do that, but you can't help thinking things. A thought comes into your head and there is no thought blocker. You have to manipulate the way that you think and the way that you act around other people. And that's what I did. And I'm just lucky that I was able to do that. Not everybody can do that. Some people can't overcome their fears, so they don't adventure out. They don't adventure into other communities and other cultures. They don't do that. And other people embrace it. Like I was born and raised in Denver, Colorado. I honestly thought the whole world was like Colorado. That everywhere you went, for example, I'll give you an example. For everywhere that I went, I thought there would be a 7-Eleven. Like in Denver. Everywhere you went in Denver, there was a 7-Eleven on every corner, practically. I thought that everywhere I went, I'd be able to find a liquor store or a bar. I talk about liquor stores and bars like I'm some kind of big old drinker. I'm really not a big drinker. But I'm just giving you an example of things that I got used to having. I used to like 7-Eleven coffee. They had these chocolate donuts. I used to call them Long Johns. And I liked them. They were the worst thing for you. It was like just drinking a cup of sugar. But I liked them. And, I got used to 7-Eleven always being around. And I got used to going into good Mexican restaurants, and the kind of Mexican food that is in Denver, I thought was going to be everywhere I went. Especially if I went to like New Mexico or California, places where there's a lot of Mexicans. I thought the food would be the same. So I figured, especially like California or New Mexico, once I got there, that the food would really be good. Oh boy, we're in a Mexican restaurant close to Mexico. The food is going to be good. It was awful. It was terrible. I couldn't find a good Mexican restaurant in them places. I went to Mexico, and some of the food that they were eating in Mexico I couldn't stand. Well, it turns out that what happened in Denver was a lot of it was influenced by the Indians. That's what it was. It was influenced by the Indians. The way that our food was cooked had a lot of Indian influence. I mean American Indians, not Indians from India, but American Indians. It had that kind of influence. So I thought everything was like the way that I was raised. But I was wrong. And then, like I said, I living in Colorado, I've gone to small towns in Colorado where they're just loaded with rednecks. Cowboys still wearing cowboy hats, cowboy boots, chewing tobacco. You get a little nervous. You get a little nervous, but you got to fight your fears. And it was the same when I went into Chinatown. I went into Chinatown all bubbly. Hi, how are you? Had my good old attitude on. Of course, I had a couple of beers in me. Just drank some Cuban coffee. I was all ready to socialize. Well, the world wasn't ready for me in Chinatown. They gave me some dirty looks and kind of like said, do you know where you're at? Or are you lost? That's the impression that I got. They weren't open arms, all come on in, and let's chat. They weren't they weren't like that at all. Because they were new to me, they still had a lot of stuff inside them, discrimination that they were dealing with. So I wasn't the kind of face they were looking forward to seeing, and one of the reasons they were where they were at is because they wanted to get away from people like me. That's just the way that the real world works. Not everybody is happy to see you just because you're happy to see them. So, I used to go roaming around to places like that, and because I thought everybody was happy to see me, and it turns out that they weren't. But you can't control what you think. You can only control what you do. And I started to learn, where to go, where not to go, how to control what I did. And then, I get along just fine here in Florida. I moved to Florida. And, there's lots of different people here, but mostly elderly. Elderly people here are like young people every place else. It's the funniest thing, because an elderly person will be driving a nice Harley, top of the line. Of course, that's one of the things about being older, is you can afford all of these cool tools. When I first got here, I pulled up behind a Corvette, a really nice red Corvette to top it off. And I expected to see some youngster in there, enjoying their life, picking up chicks. That's what I expected to see. But the guy that was driving had to be 80 or 90 years old. Happy as could be. Had that Corvette, and he was just happy. So, while people have years here, they really enjoy their life. They enjoy their lives a lot more than I see young people enjoying their life. Young people are still struggling through everything. They're still trying to find their way, get a career, build a family, which is pretty much what most people want to do. They want to team up with somebody, and it doesn't matter who you are or who you want to team up with. Everybody wants to team up with, most everybody wants to team up with somebody and have some kind of relationship and possibly a family. Not to say that you have to have any of those to be happy, but that's what most people do. But here in Florida, other than the tourists, you find a lot of old people living like they're young. All the young toys, you'll see them riding these little scooters. You'll see them riding bikes. You'll see them on the beach, walking along the beach. You'll see them in the bars dancing and singing and doing karaoke and just enjoying their lives. But I think the thing is that when you're older, like some of us are, you don't have to worry about getting up the next day and going to work. You don't have to worry about that. So if you drank a little too much, you could sleep for 3 or 4 days if you wanted to, and then go do it again if you wanted to. As you can see up on the screen, you're looking at some boats. These boats aren't owned by teenagers. These boats aren't owned necessarily by some rich fat cat. You could just be retired. And then when you retire, a lot of people, when they retire, they get this big chunk of money. Now they've got money every month from their Social Security and their retirement plans and their 401ks, whatever they have. And then usually they get that one big chunk of money. Sometimes it's pretty big, you know. It can be $40,000, $50,000. They give you that and tell you adios, or they buy you out. You know, they go ahead and retire now, and we'll give you, you know, $50,000, $30,000, whatever, and then your retirement every month. And then depends on how old you are, then you work your way up and you get your Social Security. Now you got 2 checks. So you don't have to be a millionaire to own some of these boats. Of course, you better have those couple of retirement checks to run them, because it's pretty damn expensive. I couldn't believe it. It was like $40 an hour in fuel to run some of these boats. That was a surpriser. I said, yep, you better have some cash. If you want to rent some of these little boats just to drive around, it can cost you $75 an hour to rent the boat. And I don't know if that includes fuel. But anyway, getting back to the little kid that blew her instructor's head off, and getting back to Charlie Crist and gun control. That's the thing. Are we going to continue to have, you know, our rights to bear arms and blow your instructor's head off? And did that little kid even have a right to shoot that young? She can't vote. She can't drive a car. She can't join the military. She can go to college. I'll give her that. If you're smart enough, you can be 9 years old and go to college. We have a few of them. But all of the rest you can't do, no matter how smart you are. You can't drive a car if you're underage. I don't care how smart you are. I don't care how many degrees you have in college. You can't do it. It's against the law. But it appears there's no law, age limit on guns. Maybe because back when they were writing the Constitution, 14 years old was old. Back in those days, you didn't live to be 100 like you do now. You know, 100 isn't something that you'd say, I don't think I'll make it to 100. I don't know anybody who's made it to 100. Not today. Today, you know, something breaks and they give you a new one. I was talking to my surgeon the other day, and he was casually mentioned that this operation I'm about to have should last me 30 years. That'll make me 91. I don't know how long this repair on my heart is supposed to last, but it seems like, you know, I'm going to die of old age before my heart falls apart. You know, I'm going to die of natural causes instead of, you know, having my heart fall apart the way that it did. So people are living longer. And we're also teaching them younger how to survive with an Uzi. That's what they did. So we've got ourselves what may be a new governor. All the polls, if you believe the polls, are saying that he may be our next governor. I hope so, because I'm so sick of this Rick Scott. I mean, when I look at that guy, I just want to slap him. I just want to sock him right in the mouth for some of the things that he says, the way that he lies. He just reminds me of a weasel, but except for that weasel has, you know, a couple of $1 billion in the bank. Duke Energy is our utility company. That's where we get our electricity from. And they figured out a way to cheat us out of billions. It's not unheard of to pay $450 a month for our electricity to run our air conditioners, to keep alive, really. Here in Florida, it's not unusual. So I don't know if the utility company here is a public service company. In Colorado, in Denver, it was a non-profit. It was called public service. It was a non-profit company. In other words, you just paid for the use of it. There was no profit. They made enough money to pay the people to do the work and to keep their equipment up and stuff like that, but there was no profit. Nobody was supposed to be making a profit. I'm sure they figured out how to make a profit, but they weren't supposed to by law. I don't know if it's like that here in Florida. But anyway, Charlie Crist promises to get to the bottom of it. I could go for a lower electric bill. Our water, you know, we pay in 1 month here that we used to pay in 3 months in Colorado. And we have more water here. I haven't heard of any droughts in Florida. I've heard of them in Colorado. But we pay more for our services here in Florida. For this sunshine ain't free. I can tell you that. It's a little expensive to live here in Florida. But maybe it isn't expensive. It's just maybe, I can't really afford it. Maybe I shouldn't be here. Maybe I should be back in a cow town somewhere where things are less expensive. But I don't think so. I think I'm doing just fine here with my little income and enjoying the sunshine and the old people and the young people. There's young people here too. It's not like there's not young people here. But when I first moved here, one of the things that I heard is that the first chance a young person in Florida does is they move, they leave. They go to Colorado. They can't figure out why I left Colorado and came here. Well, when you live in Colorado all your life, you want to see something different. Even if you think the whole world is like Colorado. Once you leave Colorado and you find out that it's not all like Colorado, it's just like taking a bite of something that tastes really good. You want to take another bite. And that's what we did. That's what I did when I moved to Florida. I just wanted to take a bite of something else. And it was a good move. I like it here in Florida. So Charlie Crist, he's the guy that's going to be making some changes here in Florida. He's a Democrat, so a lot of people are saying don't vote. It's a waste of your time. I think that if voting is a waste of your time isn't of much value. And maybe you'll just be in our way, and maybe you shouldn't vote. A lot of people say, well, I'm going to vote a third party. Well, you're just wasting your vote. That's all you're doing. You're making a statement, you're making a protest, but you're wasting your vote. Maybe you should organize a little bit more and make it a reality, a possibility that your guy is going to win. But some of these third parties are pretty messed up. They have no chance of winning. And so you're just wasting your vote. You shouldn't have even got up that morning to vote. That's my opinion. Because I value my vote. People of my background fought some pretty good fights and won so that I can vote. There was a time that there was no difference between a black and a Mexican. We couldn't drink out of certain water fountains or go to certain restaurants or marry whoever we wanted to without some kind of big old problem. Chinese, Japanese had the same problem here in America, but we fought and we changed things. And so voting for us is very important. We understand the power of the vote, and we're not going to give it up. But it's like somebody who's born rich. Money isn't that important when you're born rich. You can't understand why people make such a big deal out of it. Why people are so concerned with it. Why people even fight over it if you're born with it. Voting is the same way. If there was a time you couldn't vote, like women, especially women these days, because some of this isn't that long ago, in the 60s. In the 60s, it wasn't that long ago. A lot of people now weren't alive. A lot of people now whose parents weren't alive didn't know that they couldn't vote. So now they say, they're young and, don't vote. It's a waste of time. And then at the same time they spend the rest of the time complaining about their government. Complaining about the police department, what the police department does to them. Because voting doesn't make any difference. You think those people in Ferguson are just going to let their vote be wasted after what happened? Do you think the people in Missouri, the black people in Missouri, are going to let their vote be wasted? I think we're going to see some big changes in this country just because of what's happening lately with the police departments. Just the police departments alone, we're going to see some big changes. And like I said, personally, when I pick up the phone and I dial 911, I want that cop at my door. Because not all cops are bad. Not all politicians are bad. But yeah, there's some bad ones. And a lot of times these bad ones find more bad ones and they form a city. Or they unite in places like Ferguson. Or in a whole state like Missouri. You would think that this awful thing like this would happen in the South. But I read a long time ago that prejudice for black people and others is higher in the North than in the South. And you would think it'd be the other way around. But it turns out that the races learn to live together in the South and haven't quite got the hang of it in the North. That's what's happening in the United States in 2014. But then we do have a black president. We have a black attorney general. We've got a black Supreme Court justice. But we have women. We have a woman, Hillary Clinton, who may be our next president of the United States. Or maybe Elizabeth Warren. She may be the next president of the United States. The country's changing. It's changing slow. And a lot of young kids don't know what it took to get this country where it is today. They just wake up and they look at how awful things are in their little world. Or they take a Ferguson and think the whole country's that way, like I thought Colorado, like every place was like Colorado, because I didn't venture out. But a lot of people went through a lot of trouble so that we have the right to vote, and I'm not going to waste mine. I recommend that you don't either. Don't waste your vote. Don't get out there and try to change the world by voting for a third party, because you're wasting your vote. If you really want to do something, get involved in the system, get elected, and then vote for things that you think will help the people. Or even help yourself. Do it. Be selfish about it if you want to. Get elected and fix the things that's been making your life uncomfortable. A lot of people do that. Somebody may have had problems with their Social Security, or their mother had problems with their father had problems with Social Security, so they run for office, get elected, and then they fight to fix that problem. They're a one-trick pony. That's all they wanted to do. That's all they got elected to do. But that's how you make a change. That's how you do it. Get elected. Get involved in the system. But I voted for Charlie Crist. And, I hope he wins so that we could see. He's better than Rick Scott. I'll take a bad Democrat over a good Republican anytime.
It's 9 o'clock.
Because there's good Republicans out there, but they're only good for the rich. They may have never lied, cheated, or stole anything in their whole life. They may be good, honest people, but they're Republicans, and they're for the rich. Even if they're not rich, that always cracked me up. how a poor person could vote Republican, like it's going to rub off on them, like they just joined a club. No matter how poor they are, they just joined a club. I'm a Republican. Really? And even if you have $1 million, being a Republican isn't going to help you all that much, because they don't even do stuff for millionaires. Republicans are about huge corporations. That's what they're about. And that money stops rolling downhill really fast. But if you're a millionaire, and first of all, $1 million can't get you a whole lot these days. You can burn $1 million up really easy. Really easy. It looks like a lot when you don't have it. But when you have it and you start getting the things that $1 million will buy, you can burn it up pretty fast. You can knock it out in a year. Or faster, depending on what you want to buy. The bigger the money, the better the stuff you buy. The better the stuff you buy, the more money it costs. So you can start putting holes in that $1 million real quick. And even the interest, you couldn't hardly even live off the interest. If you just wanted to live off of the interest of $1 million, it's pretty hard to do. Like some of those boats that we look at, that are in this picture here that we look at, some of them will cost you $500,000. There goes half of your money right there. And then the maintenance and to park them and the fuel, all of that stuff, you can burn $1 million really easy. Houses. You can buy you $1 million home here in Florida that you might be able to pick up for $250,000 someplace else. Cost you $1 million here. So $1 million isn't all that much money. So being a Republican because you have $1 million doesn't even make any sense, because they're not really helping you. The next time somebody jumps up and down because they're a Republican, ask them, what is the Republican Party actually doing for you? Other than making you feel like you just joined some special club. What are they doing for you? And a lot of Democrats don't know what the Democrats are doing for them, but they are definitely benefiting by voting for a Democrat. We've got the Obamacare, for example. No, it's not perfect. But we've got highway systems. We have a lot of things that the Democrats try to make us have. That $7.25 don't seem like a lot, but it's a step up from where it was. Democrats did that. What about college? It's pretty expensive to go to college. Any good college programs were provided by the Democrats. The Democrats did that. Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, Democrats. Democrats are still doing that. Republicans are still trying to take it away. They say it ain't working, they can make it work better. Yeah, right. A fox in the henhouse is really what they mean, and they're there anyway. Because it's government ran and they're in the government. And they appoint people that do things in Social Security. Medicaid, Medicare, the VA, our justice system. You don't like the way cops act? Vote the Republicans out. And then when you vote the Republicans out and the Democrats in, then they appoint the police department, the police chiefs, the commissioners. You don't like the way the police department is? Vote in the elections that elect your city council. You don't like the way the schools are? Vote in the elections where you can elect your school board. You don't like the way the laws are? Vote in the elections that change the laws. A perfect example is the pot law in Colorado. That was voted in. That was voted in. Any gay rights that you have, that was voted in. Not by Republicans. Not by Republicans. So if you don't think your vote matters, it's because you don't understand the process. You think because you vote by yourself that you're by yourself. And you're not. Every thought you have, there's somebody else thinking the same exact way. But if you don't vote, it doesn't matter. And if everybody had that thought of not voting, well, the people who control things would love that. The people who control things would love that we didn't vote at all. They wanted to make it where you had to own property to vote. A lot of people don't know that. But the Republicans were trying pretty hard to push that. At one time it did used to be like that. The only people who voted were property owners. I'd get to vote. Even with my little teeny bit of property, I'd get to vote. But all you renters, you wouldn't get to vote. And we tell you how much rent you're going to pay. We make all of the laws governing how you live. So before you throw away that vote, waste that vote, you have to think about that. If you don't like the way things are, then vote. Because if you don't, they will get worse. And it'll be your life. Like I said, if you're a renter, or you have run-ins with the police department, or the legal system. Look what they were doing to them people in Ferguson. You'd get arrested, and you'd have to pay a fine. But you can't afford to pay the fine. So they'd fine you for not paying the fine. Because them are the kind of people that got elected. So now all them people are standing around hollering discrimination. All they had to do was vote. That's all. And discrimination wouldn't have been a problem. And now it's going to be harder to get over this and rebuild. So we'll keep an eye on Ferguson, not because of Mike Brown and the murder, but to see if they vote, if this pushed them over the edge to where they vote. There's a lot of people there now, a lot of different groups trying to organize them to vote because they know how important it is to vote. So they set up little offices and clinics and stuff like that, and they're trying to get the vote out in Ferguson, St. Louis. They had a governor who's a Democrat. But not all Democrats are Democrats. That's what people have to understand. Just because somebody has a D in front of their name, that doesn't mean that they're a Democrat. A Democrat is how you act. You can see somebody in a fancy suit that's just as bad as somebody who dresses in rags. No character. No empathy. No sympathy for other people. Just because they're a Democrat doesn't mean they're a Democrat. There's Republicans out there. Charlie Crist used to be a Republican. I think he was even an independent at one time. So he's played in all the parks. And right now he's a Democrat. And you know, I'm kind of happy to have him as a Democrat. Because the way that I think about it is that we need somebody in there who can pull some of the Republicans over to our side. It's hard to get them Republican votes these days because, you know, they're locked in. Gotta hate that Obama. Gotta hate that Obamacare. Gotta hate Social Security and Medicaid, even though they're getting it. Using it. Using the healthcare system. Using Obamacare. Using Social Security. Using Medicaid, Medicare. Driving on the highways. Still gotta Be a Republican. Got to vote with the Republicans. The Republicans are going to save us. Well, the Republicans ain't going to save you. They're going to save who they've always saved, and that's the rich. So if you ever wonder why it seems like I don't stay on one subject, start and just focus on one subject, well, it's because I'm just saying what I think. Whatever comes to mind, I just talk. I figure I'll put in an hour. I'll talk for an hour, say what I want to say, get everything off of my chest, and then, tell you to have a good day. So, if you're ever wondering why it looks like I just don't lock into something, it's because I'm thinking about everything I want to think about, and I'm just talking about it. Whatever comes to mind, I just talk about it. Because I'm not really trying to change your mind or make you think a certain way. I'm just telling you what my opinion is. It's just my opinion about what's going on. What's going on with ISIS? A lot of people are complaining about ISIS. ISIS is going to come over to the United States and attack us. We don't need ISIS to attack us. We attack ourselves. ISIS didn't kill Michael Brown. ISIS didn't choke that guy to death in New York. ISIS didn't kill that guy in Walmart. ISIS didn't do any of that. I don't know why people are worried about ISIS. ISIS didn't blow up the Mira building. Timothy McVeigh did. You can make ISIS look like it's a big threat to the United States. But there's 1,700 people, roughly, in that little army, that little gang. 1,700. Over 250,000 people are in gangs in the United States. Different gangs, hardcore gangs, organized gangs that are killing people in the United States every day. ISIS is good for the news, but you want to follow around something? Follow around the gangs in the United States. 316 million people in the United States. ISIS ain't shit. Real Americans know that. People who ain't trying to sell you information know that. ISIS wasn't training that little girl to use that Uzi. There's a lot of things that happen that ISIS has no clue. They say they're the best trained, terrorist group to come along lately. Well, I think the main thing is lately. We've always had somebody like ISIS. Well, they're better because we're better. They're better because we have better weapons. The world is more sophisticated when it comes to killing. ISIS isn't our problem. ISIS isn't our problem at all. ISIS could never control anything other than the little areas that they invade. Because they're attacking like little villages. It's like a gang in Mexico or in Colombia. They go into these little towns and they take them over. We don't even hear about it. ISIS isn't doing that. ISIS didn't send them 50,000 kids to America. ISIS isn't trying to take away our right to vote. ISIS isn't causing discrimination and racism in the United States. Sexism. ISIS isn't doing any of that. But to hear the Republicans talk, we got to train our kids to use Uzis because ISIS is coming. Over 250,000 gang members in the United States that we know of. Them are just the ones we know. And we're worried about ISIS. I'm not worried about ISIS. Somebody's worried about ISIS. I'm not. ISIS, ISIL, whatever you want to call them. I'm not worried about them. I'm not worried about the gangs either. And there's 250,000 of them that live in the United States. And I'm not worried about them either. I'm not worried about my neighbors. I'm not worried about the people who drive in front of my house every day. I'm not worried about the cops. But I am worried about people who don't vote and then complain because things aren't going the way that they think they should. And they're mostly young people because old people know. They know better. That's why there's the Grey Panthers. That's why old people vote, because we know better. We know how hard it was to get the right to vote. And it's even getting harder to keep it. ISIS isn't coming up and blowing up abortion clinics. Ted Nugent isn't from ISIS. Mitch McConnell, John Boehner. None of them are ISIS members. Them are American citizens. They want us to worry about ISIS? I don't know. I don't think ISIS is a problem when it comes to the United States of America. I think that prejudice in the United States of America is a problem. And prejudice has been around a lot longer than ISIS. I would worry about discrimination before I'd worry about ISIS. And like I said, I don't believe I ever will worry about ISIS, or the gang problems in the United States, or the police problems in the United States. Because like most adults, we worry about what affects us, what we have to deal with in our life, not what everybody else has to deal with in their life. You can't function like that, not for very long, because then you cease to have a life if all you do is worry about somebody else's life all day long. If you've grown old, you managed to grow old, and all you do is worry about somebody else's life, you're living a wasted life, because you're going to be out of time. And if you worry and you don't do anything about it, like vote, it's a wasted worry. You worried for nothing. You've wasted your time. And we all run out of time. So I'm Artstarzz. That's just my opinion. And my opinion is, you don't like the way things are? Don't leave America. Vote. Don't let somebody run you off with the stupid saying, if you don't like it here, leave. Don't go for it. If you don't like it here, change it. It's August 29th, 9:19 a.m. I'm talking to you from St. Petersburg, Florida, where I love it. It's nice. I hope you like it where you're at. If you don't, move. Have a good day.